What's up, party people? Happy Friday, and welcome to The Sweat. I'm Jessie Coffield alongside Reid Fowler.
Yeah, we want to jump right into NFL chatter with our panel. Say hello to DK Live's duo, Jeff Ulrich and Steve Buchanan. Bukes, this shirt's just for you. Plus Ryan Noonan of the Quan Edge and Anthony Amico of the Action Network.
All right, guys, NFL Spin Move is the name of the game, so you tell us what the fantasy impact of the following storylines is. So Redskins quarterback Josh Norman complained about Washington's lack of a home field advantage last Sunday, so he decided to do something about it. He bought 50 tickets from the Redskins box office, and he's giving them away to fans before this weekend's game against the Texans. The Redskins are 3-point home underdogs. Can they cover the spread with all this extra hype? Ryan, what do you think?
Well, the public certainly doesn't think so. According to the Action Network, we're seeing 66% of the bets and 84% of the dollars back in Houston in the spot. The end of this one with a 6-game winning streak, fresh off of a bye. I think Washington's going to struggle to move the ball here in this spot. They're without 3 starting offensive linemen. It's a bad matchup against J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney, and they're not built at all to come from behind. And even if they get the lead, this is not a good spot for Adrian Peterson to grind it out. Houston has the top-ranked run defense according to DVOA. I'm almost always going to lean towards a short home underdog, but this is a stay away from me.
Jeff, I mean, after these comments, you got to think, like, everyone's going to be out here, home field advantage. Can they cover the spread?
50 extra people.
50 extra people.
These extra 50 people, I'd look out if I was Deshaun Watson. It could get loud, right? Like that. Look out. No, I mean, this is Josh Norman might want to focus on what's going on the field. The Redskins have allowed 357 yards passing over their last 3 games, average over their last 3 games to opposing QBs. Deshaun Watson comes in off a rest week. He's fully healthy now. Now he's got DeAndre Hopkins and Demaryius Thomas to throw to. I think this is quote unquote smash spot for this passing game of the Houston Texans. And I'm not very bullish on the Redskins this week. So, no, I don't think they're going to cover personally.
All right, can they cover the spread? Bukes, what do you think?
I mean, cool storyline, I guess. You know, you can take that money and maybe buy some offensive linemen because that's what you really need, not those extra 50 fans that they're going to have in the stadium. But look, I mean, we've been saying how bad their offensive line is. Are they going to face Watt and Clowney? I mean, good luck with that. That's really going to they're going to have a long game here. Texans are coming off a bye. Hopefully, Deshaun Watson and his ribs got plenty of rest. Hopefully, they'll be healthier along the way. And I think the Texans win big in this one. I think they easily cover this side here. The early money has been pounding the Texans here. You just have to feel like you're going to join that as well. So, yeah, there's no chance that the Redskins cover here. But, hey, 50 fans. Woo, let's go.
Anthony, nobody seems to think that these extra 50 fans can make a difference. Are you part of that team as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to be. Favorites off of 14 days rest are covering 59.3% of the time since 2003, according to Bet Labs. Ryan mentioned the injuries to the Redskins. That's really big. And the defense really hasn't been as good recently either. You know, they came out hot, played some good defense early in the season, but gave up 38 points to the Falcons 2 weeks ago. They allowed the Bucs to get into the red zone 5 times last week. Even though Tampa only scored 3 points, that was kind of more on them than the Redskin defense. So I think that, Redskin defense in a really bad spot, obviously. Houston wins, Houston covers.
Yeah, that Washington over-under is 42.5, so kind of close to those 50 tickets. There's another storyline for you guys. Matt Patricia had his team practice in the Michigan snow yesterday. That's just brutal, despite the fact that the Lions don't have cold weather games until they face the Bills in Buffalo in Week 15. This led to some players to ask, well, what's the point? Just like how Jessie said there. Clearly nothing going smoothly in Detroit. I kind of like this game. So are you looking to stack some Panthers this weekend as they head to Ford Field? Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Detroit is a real mess right now, especially on defense. They just got lit up by Mitch Trubisky. They're ranked 31st in pass DVOA. Darius Slay probably is going to play in this one, but really doesn't help Detroit defend Christian McCaffrey or Greg Olsen. I think you could even argue, honestly, at this point that the most dangerous receivers on Carolina play on the inside. Darius Slay probably not going to go there this week. So I really like pairing McCaffrey and Olsen this week with Cam Newton. I think it's a good stack.
Bukes, no Marv Jones. Obviously, he was ruled out. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best matchups to exploit when you're facing the Lions is your slot receivers. They have been terrible in coverage against slot receivers. I mean, Jarius White, Greg Olsen, both see times in the slot, so that's definitely a matchup you want to exploit. You know, opposing teams have caught 74% of their targets out of the slot for an average of 15 yards per catch. Like Anthony just said, Newton, Olsen, McCaffrey feels like a really enticing stack this week, especially when you factor in how poor they are against the run. They're allowing an average of 28.5 DK fantasy points per game, which is the 8th highest in the league. Panthers look awfully enticing this week.
Jeff, do you agree with that? I mean, we've seen an uptick maybe for Theoretic's spot. You know, he seems to be a GPP play. You obviously have DJ Moore and some of these guys on Carolina. What do you think?
I mean, Matt Patricia studied under Bill Belichick, so I mean, you know, who knows what's going to happen, right? When are we going to get off that narrative? By the way, I mean, everyone under Bill Belichick sucks apparently. So, but no, look. The Panthers have like the second highest implied team total on the slate this week. This is a good spot. I mean, the guys mentioned all the plays. I'd even throw Curtis Samuel out there as a play. Great open field runner. Again, if Darius Slay's just going to shadow Devin Funchess all day, it's going to open up the field, not just for Olsen and McCaffrey, but for guys like Samuel and DJ Moore too. So no, I love the Panthers in this spot. Cam's definitely going a little under the radar. Ryan,
what do you think? Where's the early money on? What's this game looking like?
Well, I feel like you wrote this question, Reid, and we spent about 5 hours together yesterday. I know you're pretty bullish on the Carolina game here. It is a healthy implied team total. You guys are kind of going to make my point for me, though. Detroit's been abysmal all season long. They're allowing the second highest rate of explosive pass plays on the season. I just find it difficult to really hone in on a stack for Carolina with Cam. They spread the ball around a lot. I've heard Christian McCaffrey mentioned, Greg Olsen. We get jet sweeps inside the 5 to Curtis Samuel. DJ Moore is in play. It's just really hard to hone in on a preferred matchup here. So I think Cam is in play, probably run him naked. I don't love stacking him anywhere, but I think Cam, it's a good day for CMC as well. So stacks no, but I think Cam is good.
Just play them all.
What's
wrong with that?
Hey, the guy won the Millie. He played like 6 Bears last week.
Right, exactly, right.
It's a new strategy.
All right, guys.
One team.
Another good storyline. Jimmy Graham. Guess it's not a great storyline. Broke his thumb last night on Thursday Night Football. A great storyline, guys. How do you think this impacts the Packers offense, though? Jeff, is anyone going to see more targets because of this? It could be a good storyline for them.
I mean, it's hard to see Devonta Adams getting more targeting, right? But that could happen, especially in the red zone where they just default to him. I think it's going to help some of these peripheral guys. Lance Kendricks has been making a move even with Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix.
And look, Kendricks was a pretty talented pass catcher coming out of college. So he's someone who can actually get involved, see 4 or 5 targets a game. And then the other player I keep my eye on is Equiminius. I think that's right. St. Brown. He projects as a very talented receiver. So if Rodgers has been looking to him a couple times per game, if he starts to get that consistent target, I could see him being a real factor by the end of the year.
No timetable for Jimmy Graham's return right now. Steve, who do you see maybe getting some more touches because of this?
Definitely Jimi Hendrix. I think he's a great play this week.
Too much purple haze in Canada.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, look, to be brutally honest, I mean, Graham really hasn't been relevant this season or last season or the season before. I mean, not including Thursday's game because he only got 1 target before he was hurt. He was averaging just 7 targets a game, which is fine. But yet he's still averaging just 11.1 DK fantasy points on the year. So he's getting the workload, but he just really wasn't doing anything with them. He had a decent 18% market share in the red zone, which isn't a huge number to make up. I mean, so you might as well just shovel that over to Devontae Adams. But, you know, like Jeff said, you know, Lance Kendricks, that's the guy, will probably be more involved. We saw him getting involved some last night as well. And then I think, you know, Valdez-Scantling obviously is just going to keep getting some looks as well. He really seems like he has a really good rapport with Rodgers as of late. So it's probably going to trickle down to that. But, you know, like I said, Graham wasn't getting a huge workload to begin with. So I don't really think it affects too much.
Okay, so what do you think now that Graham's out? Anthony, who could be seeing some more looks? I mean, do you think this makes that much of a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just forces the Packers to coach better, honestly, because Graham hasn't been very good. Probably shouldn't be on the field to begin with. I think the Packers are going to play a lot more 3-receiver sets. That's what they did last night. 3 different receivers played on at least 88% of the snaps. I would expect that to continue with the talent that they have there. Randall Cobb still without a timetable for return. So definitely Equinemius St. Brown is going to be the biggest beneficiary right now. And if and when Cobb comes back, if he can regain his spot in the lineup, just keeps Marquez Valdez-Scantling in that every down kind of role. So I think those two guys probably see the biggest bump.
Aaron Jones, too.
Yeah, true. Newton, maybe you have somebody else there?
Yeah, no, Aaron Jones season for sure. Good call, Reid. Just not a massive loss for the Packers. He's been a pretty big disappointment this season. Coming off of back-to-back one-catch games, 21 yards or fewer in 3 of the last 4 and 4 of the last 7. So just not a massive share that's opening up here. Guys that mentioned, I'll make it easy. I'll go with ESB and MVS. I think they continue to see a little bit more sprinkles, but Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones kind of become the primary options here.
Now looking ahead to MNF, or Monday Night Football, bad joke, anticipated showdown between the Chiefs and Rams. Heinz Ketchup offered KCQB Patty Mahomes ketchup for life if he reaches 57 TDs this season. This was after Mahomes said he likes putting ketchup on his steak. Gross. He's at 31 right now. Do you think he can add 4 TDs to his total this week against the Rams, Steve, and maybe some mac and cheese as well?
No.
I mean, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
Come on.
I mean, look, opposing quarterbacks are averaging just under 2 passing touchdowns a game against the Rams this season. That includes the first 2 games where they faced the Raiders and the Cardinals, who just couldn't throw one at all. So if you take those games out, they're averaging just under 3 a game right now against the Rams. With the way Marcus Peters has been defending lately, he's going to see Tyreek Hill. He could end up with 4 of his own. Just the pass from Mahomes to Hill this week. I mean, Peters has been scored on 6 times already this season. He should be absolutely no match for Peters this week. So I think Mahomes capitalizes on that matchup if he can. So yes, I think it's totally a possibility. This Rams defense is #not good.
Jeff? Yeah, Jeff, any hashtags? What do you think here?
No, I mean, look, let's just do the math. I mean, he needs just over 4 to hit 57. So is he going to put up 4 this week? Yeah, there's probably actually a pretty good shot. I mean, this game has obviously a projected total of 64, 63 and a half, something like that right now. So he's projected to probably throw like 3, at least minimum of 3. So, I mean, 4 is very doable. He's going to need a big game down the road. Like, he's going to have to put up like 8 against the Raiders to hit 57, but it's still the Raiders. So I'm expecting at least 3 this week. Steve mentioned the matchup. I mean, this is just going to be, hopefully it lives up to the billing. It should be tons of offense on both sides, but yeah, definitely sky's the limit for Mahomes this week, in my opinion.
Ryan, 4 TDs against the Rams. What do you think?
Yeah, not a stretch at all. Definitely in the range of outcomes. In fact, I think he does hit 4, and you can find a 4-touchdown pass prop for Mahomes at numerous sports books right now, and it's paying out nearly even odds. Get it like plus 112. So the books are definitely thinking that that's a pretty safe number. So I'll be looking into that one more over the weekend. I think this game approaches 80 points. So I'm good with 4 touchdowns.
Anthony, you think 80 points, 4 touchdowns?
No, I'm totally with Ryan here. I mean, I think this game, I'm betting the over on this like 6 different ways this week.
Nice.
Because it's the highest total we've seen in the Bet Labs database. There's really no reason to not expect it to go over. These are 2 teams really high in pace. They're 2 of the 3 highest scoring teams in the league. And the Rams are allowing the 8th highest yards per pass attempt since losing a key to lead prior to week 4. Also allowing the 3rd most yards per deep pass attempt, which is obviously a huge problem when you're going against, Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. Rams really have no answer for Hill, especially if they keep playing cover 1 like they have. So, yeah, I think Mahomes definitely can do this.
All right, thanks, gang. We got some NBA on the way right after we hear from Pat Mayo.
Corey Davis is number 21. Listen, I've believed in the volume all year. I've been a Corey Davis backer, but I don't think he's the most trustworthy guy in the world, as isn't Allen Robinson, who's number 22. Then you got like Tyrell Williams, Sterling Shepard, Murray, Marv Jones, Sammy Watkins, Cortland Sutton, Larry Fitzgerald, Calvin Ridley. I think that Cortland Sutton is the really interesting one here. Only because in the first week, everyone got all jazzed up to use him. I had him as my number 1 waiver wire pickup this week because a lot of people dropped him after that 1 week. Yep. He should be fine here, though.
He should be, but this is one of those situations where we might be putting too much the talent and the opportunity, and it doesn't always match up. Sometimes these wide receivers, like, let's go back. We're still dealing with the year of the Odell Beckham draft class of wide receivers affecting everybody still today. And the fact that wide receivers take longer than running backs, tight ends take longer than wide receivers, but there's a learning process. And heck, you go to Golden Tate's situation, which I know we'll get to, and is a different one, but there's people who have been in this league for a very long time that go to a new team and can't adjust immediately. So you have somebody that's a rookie coming into the NFL. It's not a surprise that it might take them. You remember just a few years ago, Pat, it was the third year wide receiver breakout. Like that was a thing. Everybody knew that. Everybody knew you just waited for the third year. So there's a ton of excitement for Courtland Sutton, and it's warranted, especially when we talk about his talent. And now the opportunity is there. But we kind of have to play this game where maybe if your trade deadline hasn't passed, you still sell high on the guy, especially if he has a good game, because I like it. I just don't know he's going to be a top 30 wide receiver the rest of the way.
I think that he's going to be right around there. I was actually quite encouraged with the volume that he saw 2 weeks ago against the Texans. He just couldn't come through. I believe it was 6 catches, 9 targets. Not so bad.
Right.
Like if he's going to do that every time out and generate 9 targets, I'll roll the dice on that.
I don't have a problem with that in PPR. I think in non-PPR a little bit more concerning. And again, this is going to be a very
do people even play non-PPR anymore?
They still do. We're actually getting a very nice cross-section of all three now. You should just half-point PPR. Just play a half-point. At least it's a good medium. Like, perfect example, go back to Saquon Barkley that I brought up before. Yeah, that 7-yard screen that he caught in the flat and got a negative 5-yard loss, still got you a half-point. That makes sense.
Suppose. So you're about to finish on Courtland Sutton?
Oh, no, just I'm with you. I think top 30, and that's why I said it, because he's right in that range. There's a lot of people out there who, as soon as this happened, said, oh, he's a definitive wide receiver too. And that was his upside. We still have to remember, Case Keenum's the quarterback. This offense has had some struggles here and there. They don't have great matchups every single week the rest of the way. So I can see a lot of wide receiver 2 weeks, and I can see a handful of wide receiver 4 weeks, and that's why I think that 30-ish number is a good one.
All right, let's head to the hardwood with a special NBA guest, Minnesota Timberwolves pregame show host John Folke. You can hear him on WCCO Radio in Minneapolis and see him on Fox Sports North.
So, John, we're talking all things Jimmy Butler. We want the latest on the deal from the Timberwolves' perspective on this one. So let's jump in. As we all know, Minnesota finally traded Jimmy Butler this week. Timberwolves owner Glenn Taylor said Butler's trade request brought a negative energy and that he had already spent too much of my time on things that were negative. So, John, have you noticed the energy around the team change, maybe like a sense of relief?
Well, I think the biggest thing you notice is, number one, the team's not losing. You know, towards the end of the Jimmy Butler tenure, they were on the road for 10 days, 5 West Coast stops, and they dropped all 5 of them. And Anthony Tolliver commented on that Monday after the trade went down and, basically said that when you're going through a tough patch like Minnesota was, losing games, everything feels heavier. And certainly, Jimmy's situation kind of hanging over everybody made things incredibly difficult for the Wolves towards the end there. So I think a different energy in the sense that, all the guys talked about it earlier this week, that you're turning the page on that situation and you're moving into, a new kind of turning the leaf, if you will, into a new era for the rest of this season. And I think the big thing too is, wondering kind of what this team was going to look like. You knew Jimmy wasn't going to be there long term. And so whether it was the guys, whether it was the fans, whether it was us as broadcasters, you're always kind of wondering, what will this team look like maybe come February, maybe come April? And so now we kind of have a much clearer picture of it. So I think from that standpoint, there's definitely a different energy. And then anytime you bring in new guys, they bring with them a different energy as well. And I think we saw that on Wednesday.
So Karl-Anthony Towns got off to a slow start by his standards, but has been money the last few games. Is that a direct correlation to Butler moving on and him being more of a focus on the offense? Obviously one of the best players in the NBA right now.
Well, I think a couple of things. When you look back in the early part of the season, Cat was really struggling with foul trouble, just, picking up cheap early ones, having to go to the bench, unable to get into a rhythm. These last couple of games, I feel like he's really asserted himself on the glass. I mean, he had 21 rebounds on Monday in the win over Brooklyn. He followed it up with 16 in the win over New Orleans. And then, of course, piling up points as well in both of those games. So I just love the fact that he's out there crashing the glass. Minnesota has really struggled. I mean, you look at all their rebounding metrics, specifically on the defensive end and in terms of opponent second chance points, and they've really struggled in that area this year. So over the last 2 games, to see Cat asserting himself on the glass, to see Minnesota winning the rebounding battle, I think those things have really helped fuel his offense.
And how have the 2 players acquired for Butler, Covington and Sark, fit in with the team?
Oh, man, they were fantastic on Wednesday. Covington slid into the starting lineup. Team was without Derrick Rose. Rob played 41 minutes. He had 13 points, 7 rebounds, hit a couple of threes. He was high-fiving the fans. The fans were into it. Just brought great energy. His length and certainly his defensive mindset could help this team, which has struggled on the defensive end. They're 29th in defensive rating coming into this evening. And then Šarić as well, played 20 minutes off the bench. He had 9 points, but made some big hustle plays. The crowd was behind him. And so early on, you're seeing those guys pay dividends in the way that they're impacting the team on the floor, but also kind of just providing a boost of energy and a jolt to the fan base as well.
John, as currently constructed, do you think this is the team we see moving forward, or will Minnesota look to continue to add pieces before the deadline?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because you look, whether in the backcourt or the front court, and you've got, some redundancy there. I mean, when you talk about Jeff Teague, Derrick Rose, Tyus Jones, and then you add Jared Bayless. And then up front with Šarić coming over to join Taj Gibson, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Tolliver, and Gorgui Dieng. So you've got some extra pieces there. And, of course, every team needs depth. We know that with the way the injury bug can strike a team at a very inopportune time. But already you're seeing, some guys being the victim of that depth. Anthony Tolliver was a DNP Wednesday against New Orleans. And so you never know what will happen in terms of what this roster will look like by the time we get to February, by the time we get to March. I think fans and media members and everybody want to say are always looking for the next best thing. But you guys know the problem in the NBA and in every league is that in order to make a trade, it takes 2 to tango. So you got to find the right partner. But I think this trade and bringing over Covington and Šarić really addressed some needs for Minnesota, while at the same time bringing in players with a skill set that complement your cornerstones in Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns.
John, thanks again for the time. Really good stuff. Obviously, Minnesota, one of the more exciting teams, and for giving us the perspective from Minnesota. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you guys.
Thanks. Now let's bring in our NBA panel, Matt D'Agostino of NBA.com and Matt LaMarca of the Action Network. And gentlemen, we're going to play pick and roll. And Matt LaMarca, I'm going to refer to you as LaMarca so that we don't get confused here. So let's start with who we were just talking about, Jimmy Butler. He's priced at $7,300 tonight against Utah. LaMarca, do you like him or his former buddy, Karl Anthony Towns, $9,600?
Yeah, this one's pretty easy for me. I know he's significantly more expensive, but you got to give Karl Anthony Towns the edge in this matchup. I still think he's underpriced with Butler now playing in Philadelphia. We have a pretty good track record of this guy being one of the best fantasy players in the league whenever Butler is out of the lineup. He's averaged just under 50 DraftKings points in 5 games this season without Butler, and at least 53.5 in each of his past 3. He's still priced at just $9,400, so to me that's still pretty good value. And the Timberwolves implied team total ranks 5th on the slate. They have a pretty good matchup against the Blazers. Meanwhile, we have a lot more questions about Philadelphia now adding Butler into that rotation. If you look at what he did in his first game, just 21 DraftKings points, so a pretty significant reduction in usage rate and assist rate. So there's still a lot of questions about how he's going to fit playing next to Ben Simmons, who needs to have the ball in his hands to be effective, and Joel Embiid, who's one of the highest usage players in the league. So, yeah, for sure, give me Towns in this matchup.
Where are you going with this one, Matt D?
Yeah, I got to agree with Matt. Towns is starting to look like the guy who led the league in double-doubles last season now. And although is not really a vocal guy and didn't really say much when all the Jimmy Butler saga was going down, he's certainly playing like a guy who feels more relaxed and is more at ease now. So he's been great the last few games, really starting to pick things up. And although Butler's salary at just $7,300 is pretty enticing, Matt's also right about that. Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, all kind of looking around at each other, their first game together and saying, are you supposed to shoot it? Or am I supposed to shoot it? Like, it just doesn't make well for fantasy stats when you guys are trying to figure out roles in that scenario. So I think Butler will be good in time, and I don't think his price will stay this low forever, but I still like Towns just a whole lot more confident in what he's doing right now.
And LaMarca, just so you know, Towns is $9,600, not $9,400. So
yeah, what's 200 a month?
Just so you know.
200.
Just so you know.
That's a lot of Chipotle.
Yeah,
actually.
a lot of Chipotle.
So John or Matt, we'll go to you. Wizards point guard John Wall, 9,500 is the highest priced guard on the slate. Do you like him, or Pacers guard Victor Oladipo, who's $200 less at 9,300, coming off back-to-back 50-point fantasy games? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Oladipo is probably, for me, the better pick. Just everything around Washington this season, the stench that's going on with that slow start that they've had, just to kind of turn me away from a lot of Washington Wizards guys so far in the early part of this season. But Oladipo, you mentioned the back-to-back 50-point performances. The game before that, he had 65.5 fantasy points. So he's clicking on all cylinders at this point, and he had 52 points against Miami last week, who they play again tonight. So for my money, I think Victor Oladipo is a safer choice.
LaMarca, what do you think?
I'm going Oladipo as well. This one definitely a little bit closer than the first matchup, but if you just compare the two, Oladipo has been better on a per-minute basis than Wall this season. And like Matt said, he's just been balling out recently, exceeding his salary-based expectations by an average of 7.5 points over his past 10 games. Nice spot for him today against the Heat. If you look, they play at a much faster pace than the Pacers do, and their implied team total of 109.75 is roughly 4 points higher than their regular season average. So I think Oladipo is just maybe one of the more underappreciated players in the league. He might not have the same name recognition as John Wall right now, but he's the better player of the two, in my opinion.
All right, so Giannis at 11,500 is the highest priced player on the slate. Or would you rather take the guy who is usually the highest priced player on the slate, Anthony Davis, at 11,400? So where are you going to go with this one, LaMarca?
I don't think either guy is a must tonight, but I will go with Anthony Davis here. I think he's coming in with lower ownership, and I just think he has a much safer minutes floor. If you look at Giannis, the Bucks are 14.5-point favorites tonight, so it's very possible that that game could turn into a blowout. I mean, Davis is also a 10.5-point favorite, so it's not like that game is a lock to stay close either. But I think that either way, he's going to play more minutes than Giannis. He hasn't posted a monster game in a while, but he has gone for at least 58.25 in 4 straight. And the Knicks are just 27th in defensive efficiency this season. So if they do manage to keep this game competitive, I think Davis is going to have a field day against their big men.
Matt, where are you going with this?
Yeah, I'll take Giannis in this one. I really don't think you can go wrong with either guy at this point. But I'll use Anthony Davis's success as a reason why I'm going with Giannis. Back November 7th, AD went for 71 points against the Bulls. And kind of my thinking with both of these guys is who on Chicago can guard those guys? I mean, not many guys who can guard Giannis in the entire league, but this Bulls team ravaged by injuries. You've got Jabari Parker, a homecoming, going back to Milwaukee to take on his old team. But is he going to guard Giannis? I just don't see who's going to guard the Greek Freak in this one. So at $100 more, I'll pony up the extra 100 to go with the Greek Freak.
All right, two guys in the low to mid 7K range. Marc Gasol at 7,400 versus Sacramento, or Yusuf Nurkic at 7,100 after dropping 54.5 fantasy points in his last start. Pick your guy, Matt.
Yeah, I'll go with Gasol. I feel more safe with him. A guy who's done it more often than Nurkic. Nurkic kind of came out of nowhere for a big line against the Lakers the other night. But Gasol's gotten at least 40 DraftKings points in 3 of his last 4 games, and he's done it 6 times this season. And Nurkic has only done it 3 times. So Gasol against that Sacramento defense that seemingly year after year cannot defend bigs, I think Gasol could be in for the bigger night between the two.
LaMarca, you agree with that? You're going Gasol as well, or where are you going with this?
Yes, I am. I mean, I like both. The thing with Nurkic is when the other team has a bigger traditional center, he tends to play more minutes. So I do think he could be in for a nice game against Towns. But I love Memphis Grizzlies tonight. I'm playing all of them, including Marc Gasol. The Grizzlies have played at the slowest pace this year. The Kings have played at the absolute fastest. So you can't get a bigger pace-up spot than what the Grizzlies are in tonight, which is awesome for fantasy purposes. If you look at what Gasol has historically done in high-paced games, he's exceeded his salary-based points by over 4 points. And I think getting him at 7,400 is a really nice bargain. So give me all the Gasol and all the Grizzlies in general.
All right, guys, thank you for dropping your NBA knowledge on us. We'll be back with some NHL talk. But first, I caught up with Mike Francesa earlier today. Let's give it a listen. It's a Francesa Friday. I'm joined by WFAN's Mike Francesa, host of Mike's On. Of course, we thank you, as always, for joining us.
My pleasure, Jessie. Nice to talk to you.
All right, so the Melo era ends in Houston after just 10 games. I mean, what do you think went wrong here?
I didn't think anything went wrong. I'm surprised that I said at the time I was surprised it ever started. I remember back in New York, D'Antoni got to the point where he couldn't even go to practice. He hated being around Carmelo so much. They didn't like each other. He couldn't stand Carmelo. So I was so shocked to hear that Carmelo was going to go there after what D'Antoni had built there. It shocked the heck out of me. It made no sense to me. So that it didn't last does not surprise me. I never thought it should have started.
If you had to give your opinion, where do you think Melo should land next?
See, I think Melo's problem was he was in a perfect spot. He just won't buy the role. He should have stayed where he was. And what he needs to become is a Vinnie Johnson to go back a generation, instant offense player. That's where he is now in his life. If he doesn't come to grips to that soon, I think he's going to be out of the league.
All right, well, there's drama all over the league. Kevin Durant, Draymond Green having a meltdown there. Green was suspended by the team for 1 game. So when you look at all the pieces, is this the beginning of the end for the Warriors?
Yes, I thought it was. And if people remember with me, I said before the year started when they got Cousins, it was the beginning of the end. You actually saw the beginning of the end last year. These things only have so much of a cycle, especially when you have that many alpha dogs in the same room. So they all want to get paid. See, eventually, with players, it's one of two things. They either get rings early and they want the money, or they get money early and they want the ring. It's a little different for Durant. He wants a legacy game. So he not only wants the rings, he wants them in a certain way. He'll pick a place where he thinks he can add to his legacy.
All right, let's switch things up a little bit. Phillies owner John Middleton says they could be stupid with their money this offseason. What exactly do you think that means?
That means they're the Phillies. They'll be stupid, and now they have a lot of money. But they've always been stupid. Now they're just going to add some money to it, which means they'll be throwing zeros at a lot of guys. They have this dream in the back of their mind that somehow the Angels will get tired of the Trout situation where we can lose with them, and they would back up the truck because Trout wants to play in Philly. He doesn't have a dream to play anywhere else. He's a guy who wants to be a Philly. He goes to Eagle games. He's a South Philly. He's a South Jersey guy, so he's a Philly guy. That won't happen. So with that, the next thing is they'll go buy a big player.
So was DeGrom the right choice for Cy Young?
Oh, his year was so good. Absolutely. I don't have a problem with the guy who voted for Scherzer, the 1 vote. In New York, he was castigated. I don't think that's fair. DeGrom's year was scary good. He broke records. It would have been a total injustice to not give him the Cy Young.
So Christian Yelich and Mookie Betts earning the MVP awards. Let's start with Betts. How can an MVP come from such a stacked team?
He deserved it, though. He had a great year. You know, listen, this is all you have to do now is to understand MVP voting is just go look at who has the highest OPS. The guys with the highest OPS are always going to be right there. That's how this is all judged. So forget that the injustice was that there weren't 2 Red Sox in the final 3. There should have been. He deserved it. And a lot of people made the point that Betts might have been the MVP of the league, but that Martinez might have been the MVP of the Red Sox.
Now, do you think Yelich was the clear choice in the NL?
Yeah, I do. I don't think he had a great postseason, but that doesn't count. I think the way he came on, as good as he was in every category, and the way that they won, I think Yelich deserved it.
So you said he didn't make the playoffs. That doesn't count. But when you're a candidate, does making the playoffs give you an edge in the MVP voting?
I think if all things are equal, it does. Otherwise, but I think, remember, it's always a very fine line. You always have to define it, and no one really does. Is it player of the year or is it most valuable? On a last place team, how could you ever call it most valuable? But we've given the award to guys who have a blowaway year and their team finishes last. Well, hell, they could have finished last without him. So, I mean, the point is, it's hard to define it that way. That's always been the tricky part, but it's a little bit of both. They try to make it about value, but they always make it about the best player. It is the best player award most years. And I think the guys they named were probably the best players in their league this year.
Francesa Friday coming to a close. We appreciate the time as always.
Thanks very much.
All right, we're taking this show to the ice. Say hello to our DFS hockey analyst and expert, Sean Newsham. Sean, You're going to help us decide between the top priced players at each position.
Sean, I did my homework here on pronunciation. So we start at center. Nathan MacKinnon getting the best of Patrice Bergeron when they went head-to-head this week. Now facing different opponents, so who's in the best spot? MacKinnon at 7,700 versus Washington, or Bergeron for 7,400 at Dallas?
Yeah, I think both spots are actually very favorable for them. Washington, over the course of the year, has given up the second most Corsi against on the slate, and then over the last month, we have Dallas giving up the second most Corsi against on the slate. So it's a good situation for both of them. For me, I'm going to shade towards Nathan MacKinnon. The reason I'm going to do this is because McKinnon's top 3 in the league in shots. He's just had a better year overall than what Bergeron has had. So it's a very close situation between the two, but I think I would lean slightly more towards MacKinnon tonight than Bergeron.
All right, now on the wing, two guys within $100 of each other. The Stars, Alexander Radulov at 6,900 versus Boston, or Toronto's Mitch Marner for 6,800 at Anaheim. Where are you going to go with this one?
For me, this one is pretty simple. I'm going to go with Mitch Marner. He's someone I've liked all year, and I think he's just going to have an explosive year. He is in the 97th percentile in shots for over the last 15 games. And Radulov and Dallas, just in general, has really struggled. And they're going to draw the Bergeron line, which is a very difficult thing defensively. Anaheim is one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to allowing scoring chances, especially in the high danger areas. So for me, I think Mitch Marner is a much better selection to choose from.
All right, Sean, let's talk defense. Winnipeg's Dustin Byfuglien at 6,100 versus Buffalo, or Washington's John Carlson for 5,900 at Colorado. What do you think?
So these two, when you look through all the metrics, come out pretty close, but I think the deciding factor tonight is the matchup against Buffalo. Dustin Byfuglien's in the situation where Buffalo gives up a lot of shots, especially from the point. They give up tons of chances from defensemen in general. So when you look at the two, and they have everything else pretty much comes out very evenly when you talk about shots, block shots, Corsi expectations. So for me, I would much rather go to the situation where Winnipeg is a much bigger favorite, and they draw a Buffalo team that allows a ton of chances from the point. So I think Dustin Byfuglien's your selection here.
All right, finally in goal, the Jets are going with backup Laurent Brossoit, who will cost you $8,200 versus Buffalo. Or you could go rookie Cal Peterson, making his first career NHL start for the Kings in Chicago. Now he's priced at $6,900. So what are you going to do here? Maybe take a chance with the rookie?
I think in GPPs, taking a chance with Peterson definitely could make some sense. I think that you have a situation where they should see a decent amount of shots from a Chicago team that generates a decent amount of shots. And LA is not going to be a very highly owned because they're going to be underdogs. For cash games, though, I think you definitely want to look towards Laurent Brossoit. They are the biggest favorite on the slate tonight. So I think that in cash games, you definitely want to look towards him. But in GPPs, I think Peterson makes a ton of sense.
All right, Sean, before we let you go on your Friday night, who is your slate-approved pick, your lock of the night? What do you think?
So my slate-approved lock of the slate for this Friday is going to be a little bit of a value play, but it's Duncan Keith. You look through Duncan Keith's logs, and it's not as fantastic as what you've seen in previous seasons. However, his Corsi numbers are still pretty solid. His expectations are relatively high in that aspect, and his block shot numbers are actually really significant. He's blocked a lot more shots than what you see from most elite defensemen this year. So despite the fact that his point total isn't what you would normally find, at 3,700 you can get an elite defenseman like Keith. I think that's a good value option for tonight's slate.
All right, thanks, Sean. Appreciate the time as always. Now, all of you watching at home, stick around. We've got NBA talk on the way. It's your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. I'm Tara Lenazak. Well, the Carmelo Anthony experience has come to an end for the Rockets. Houston hoped bringing in a veteran scorer would be the key to getting them to the next step, and Anthony hoped to get the chance to compete for a title. In the end, it just was another team that didn't work for Melo. The 10-time All-Star only played 10 regular season games with the Rockets, primarily in a bench role. Houston's GM Daryl Morey said in part, "The fit we envisioned when Carmelo chose to sign with the Rockets has not materialized. Therefore, we thought it was best to move on, as any other outcome would have been unfair to him." Since Melo signed with the Rockets as a free agent this summer, his future could remain in limbo for a while. He is not eligible to be traded until after the December 15th trade restriction, and the Rockets have no plans to immediately waive him. So, where does Melo go from here? Wherever he lands, it will be the fourth team in the last 2 seasons for the 17-year vet.
Welcome back, friends of the interwebs, and welcome back to our NBA panel. Matt D'Agostino of NBA.com and Matt LaMarca of the Action Network, obviously known as LaMarca. We're checking in with you both on any late-breaking lineup news that's going to make us obviously change at the last minute, and moves evaluating if certain players will need certain value picks, a.k.a. price check.
Price check.
Yeah.
So, LaMarca, is there any late-breaking news or injury storylines that you've had your eye on leading up to lock tonight?
Yeah, I mean, this is really a light night in terms of injury news for the NBA. The one big one I was monitoring was Derrick Rose's status in Minnesota, but he's just been ruled in a few minutes ago. So that's interesting. It's definitely going to impact guys like Jeff T, Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins. People may not realize, but Rose has actually been the highest usage player on the Timberwolves this season. So maybe a guy like Towns isn't as safe as we all thought tonight. A lot of the damage that he's done recently has come with Rose out of the lineup. So that could be sort of a low-key narrative to take into consideration.
So anything, Matt, that we need to add to that LaMarca may have left out? Anything you've been keeping your eye on?
Yeah, again, it's kind of a light night for injuries, but Nikola Mirotic, Elfrid Payton both look like they're going to play against the Knicks, so that's something to keep in mind if you're looking at Anthony Davis. He doesn't have to shoulder as much of the load tonight against New York, and then it came out about an hour and a half ago, but Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is out, so a couple of cheap options for the Brooklyn Nets. DeMarre Carroll, who played in a season-high 28 minutes his last time out, and maybe even Alan Crabb if you're looking for shooting for Brooklyn going up against Washington.
Very good. Moving on to price check now for the ones and twos. Hope you guys caught that little joke there. It was a pretty bad one again. Damian Lillard at 9,100. Matt, do you think Dame returns value at Minnesota? What do you think?
I do. I think this is a good spot for him with a salary of 9,100. Portland's played a lot of home games so far, just 5 on the road, but actually he's scored 30 points a game, 30 actual points a game in his 5 road games this season. They're at Minnesota taking on the Timberwolves, who are 29th in defensive efficiency. So this may be a good spot for Damian Lillard to kind of exceed some value against Minnesota.
Well, Mark, what do you think? Obviously, Drew Holiday, a little obviously cheaper than that, but what do you think here?
Yeah, I like Lillard at this price as well. If you look at his average, he's done 1.31 DraftKings points per minute this season. That's tied with Oladipo for the top mark among guards on this slate. And I like the matchup with the Timberwolves as well. Both of these teams have a top 5 implied team total. There's only a 1-point spread on this game, so it should be a competitive back-and-forth contest. And what I really like is we only have him projected for about 5 to 8% ownership over at Fantasy Labs. You know, Lillard is always capable of putting up a 60-burger, especially against a guy like Derrick Rose, who is not known for his defensive prowess. So I think he's a nice tournament play.
All right, moving on to the forwards. Kawhi is 9,000 at Boston. Do you think he does well at the Garden tonight, LaMarca?
I think this is a little too high for me. He did manage to go for 51 in his first game this season against the Celtics, but Boston is first in the league in defensive efficiency, and the Raptors are pretty deep. So they just don't need to lean on Kawhi that heavily most nights. He's averaging just 32.8 minutes per game. Maybe he picks up another 1 or 2 with CJ Miles out of the lineup, but they just have a ton of other guys that they can lean on in terms of minutes, like Pascal Siakam, who's been great for them this year. So I don't think they're going to need a huge performance tonight from Kawhi, and so I think this is probably a touch high.
Matt, do you agree? Do you feel like the $9,000 price tag might be a little too much?
I do. He didn't have a great game his last time out, and his salary went up $400. But I think LaMarca hit it on the head. Boston's #1 in defensive efficiency. They have got a plethora of guys they can throw at Kawhi defensively who can all match that kind of length, whether it's Gordon Hayward or Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, any of those guys. Even a Marcus Morris could help off the bench for them. But Kawhi in his first 5 games had 48 or more DraftKings points in all of them, and he's had just a high of 46 in his last 5 games. So a guy who really hasn't kept up the pace that he had out of the gates. So I think Kawhi Leonard not as likely to return good value tonight.
All right, last one for price check here. Joel Embiid is at 10,300 against the Jazz. What are we thinking here, Matt? Because we talked about a lot about some of the big men here. So what do you think of his price tag?
Yeah, I think it's high for 2 words. Rudy Gobert going up against the Utah Jazz, He's going to put a little damper on Joel Embiid's night, I have a feeling. And also what we talked about in the last segment, just Philadelphia trying to figure out who's going to get the ball, who's going to get shots, and where they're going to get them between Ben Simmons, Embiid, and Jimmy Butler. Embiid, despite the triple-double his last time out, I think he's going to have a rough time getting value at 10,300.
Lamarca, what do you think here? I mean, we have Rudy Gobert relatively cheaper than Embiid, so what do you think?
Yeah, I think the price on Embiid is probably right. The problem is that there are so many other centers on DraftKings that are underpriced that it's hard to look at them. I mean, we already mentioned Marc Gasol. We mentioned Karl Anthony Towns. I think both of those guys are better values than Embiid for sure. That said, I do think Embiid is interesting for tournaments. I think that the matchup with Utah probably will result in some lower ownership for him. But what people don't really know is that Utah has been beat up pretty bad by opposing centers at times this season. They're allowing the 6th highest plus-minus to the position this year. They've given up 51 to Marc Gasol already, 64 to Towns, roughly 52 to DeAndre Jordan, and 45 to Jokic. And Embiid is a better fantasy player than all of those guys. So it would not shock me if he went for 60-plus in this matchup, and again, if he did it at reduced ownership.
All right, Lamarca, we'll stay with you. Who is your slate-approved pick for tonight's slate?
Well, I already mentioned I love the Grizzlies. I think my favorite member of the team is Mike Conley. I think he's underpriced right now, and the pace-up spot should benefit him more, I think, than any other player on the team.
All right, Matt D., what do you think? Who is your slate-approved pick?
All great Matts think alike. I was worried when you mentioned you like the Grizzlies tonight that you may be going in that direction, but I had Mike Conley as well. I think the price is right there. 44.5 DraftKings points in their first matchup against Sacramento for Conley. I think in terms of price and production, I think Conley stacks up the best among anybody tonight.
All right, thanks, Matt. You guys are free to go. Enjoy yourselves on this beautiful Friday night. And we're going to welcome back our NFL panel in just a little bit. But first, let's hear from Adam Levitan and the guys from the DFS Edge with this week's conviction plays.
For my conviction play, I'll just take the layup here, man, because I'm tired of this conviction play, bold call play, etc. Michael Thomas, to me, has been so good in mediocre matchups and bad matchups and good matchups. Wide receivers against the Eagles are just the best matchup because nobody even wants to try to run against them. Everybody just wants to throw, and they do it on such an efficient basis because their secondary is so bad. Here in the Superdome, where I expect the Eagles to keep up with the Saints, I mean, Michael Thomas is going to get 9, 10, 11, 12 targets, has a huge red zone role, second in the league behind DeAndre Hopkins in targets inside the 10. So I know Michael Thomas is the most expensive wide receiver on the slate. That doesn't mean he's not the best wide receiver on the slate.
Yeah, totally agree with Michael Thomas. I think he's a lock button for cash. I'll stay in the same game. Just talked a ton about Zach Ertz. It's a combination play because I do think in cash there's a lot of arguments to play RSJ or a cheaper tight end. But, man, Zach Ertz in this game environment shouldn't go off. I think that you want to buy targets, you want to buy touches. We've always talked about opportunity on this podcast, and no tight end is seeing more opportunity. And if you compare Zach Ertz to the other mid-6 receivers, he's clearly the play. So I love Zach Ertz this week. And Zach Ertz, Michael Thomas, nice little game stack to play all the dudes in the late hammer, Smiths.
Adam wouldn't do it. Pete wouldn't do it. But I'm going to do it. Amari Cooper is my conviction play for over 15 DraftKings points this weekend. I couldn't fire up Adam. I did get Pete fired up. We're going to have a fun weekend this week on DraftKings. That's my conviction play. Hopefully Emmanuel Sanders can score himself a touchdown and Pete can get into the end zone himself. But for Adam and for Pete, I'm Al. I'm out.
Oh, and Al is out. Final block of the show. Remember TGIF?
TGIF.
Oh, my God. Am I right? Am I right?
You're right.
Bukes, let's have some fun here and go quad box with our NFL panel. DK Live's Jeff Ulrich, obviously Steve Buchanan, the Action Network's Anthony Amico, and Ryan Noonan of the Quant Edge. Quad box. First time on this side.
Quad box.
There we
Time
go.
for NFL high or low. So are these players' prop lines too high, too low, or just right? Starting with the quarterback position, Blake Bortles with 250.5 passing yards. Too high or too low, Ryan?
This feels too low. The range of outcomes, though, for Bortles is just so big. Pittsburgh enters this one having won 5 straight, and they have held their opponent below their team total in all 5 games. He has topped this mark in 5 of 9 games this season, and when he tops it, he typically crushes it. Conversely, in the 4 games, he's fallen short of this mark. He hasn't even reached 180 yards in those contests, so it's not a great matchup. Pittsburgh is getting a ton of pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and their season-long stats don't really tell the whole story because Joe Hayden and Mike Hilton have been balling out of late. I know Bukes is on this one big time, so fading Bukes feels like a good place to be.
Wow.
Wow, Bukes, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, Ryan's getting a little chippy. Must have hit the ball a little early on this Friday night.
Never too early, my friend.
But look, I don't mind this number for Bortles. I mean, when he faced him back in week 1, he had only 214 passing yards, but he did that on just 14 completions, and he chucked the ball 26 times. I mean, the Steelers' defense has definitely shored up a bit. They've allowed just an average of 197 passing yards over the past 3 weeks, but that's against the Browns, before they fired everybody. The Ravens and the Panthers. So I don't know how much stock I'm going to put into that just yet. I think Bortles is able to reach this week. I think the Jacksonville defense is just absolutely toast at this point. So I think there's going to be plenty of scoring for the Steelers, which bodes well for Bortles to keep chucking the ball. So I definitely think he gets his chances here this week.
Oh, okay. Jeff, where are we going on this one?
I mean, I think Ryan's onto something. That Blake Bortles his outcome is either like 330 yards or like 120. It feels like so. It's just complete boom or bust. I'd still take the under here, though. I mean, 250 is quite a bit. And Pittsburgh's defense is really coming on of late. They've held their last 4 opposing quarterbacks to well under this total. So, I get that the Bortles might be in a situation late in the game to be passing a lot. I don't know if that's going to matter because Pittsburgh's they've got one of the best pass rushes in the league, and then B, Bortles sucks. So you get a classic Bortles game here, and it's not going to end well. So I definitely veer on the side of the under here against this upcoming Pittsburgh D.
Anthony, are you going to go over, under, too high, too low, just right? What do you think?
There's so many options.
I know.
There.
I'm trying to confuse you.
I'm going to say that it's too high. Bortles has only averaged 228.5 yards passing in games played with Leonard Fournette in his career, 194.2 yards in such games with Jacksonville as an underdog. So I think Fournette back in the lineup definitely dictates a little bit more of how this game is going to go from an offensive perspective. Ryan mentioned the Steelers are doing a great job of getting after the quarterback. They're 6th in adjusted sack rate and 3rd best in net yards allowed per pass attempt. Bortles just 22nd in the NFL in passer rating when under pressure, according to Pro Football Focus. So I think he goes under this.
Only one investor in the Bort coin, and it's Steve Buchanan on an island again. So good luck, Steve. That's Bortles is a guy that we never figure out. So let's talk about running backs. Jeff's favorite guy, his boy, David Johnson, and 77.5 rushing yards. Let me guess, Jeff. It's too low. What do you think?
Hey, you play David Johnson every week. Eventually, it's going to work out.
Yeah,
right? So eventually it did.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't keep working out this week. I mean, I'm not even going to get into the stats with the Raiders defense. They're awful. I mean, and some of the games they've given up to tandems like Carlos Hyde and Nick Chubb, for example, went for almost 200 yards against them. There's no other running back on Arizona. I made this point last week, by the way. Steve wasn't listening, but it's just David Johnson. Okay. Chase Edmonds is just there to give David Johnson a breather. Okay, like David Johnson takes all the backs. He's still in a main every down role, so we have to remember that. I think he'll go well over this mark this week.
Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'll put some numbers on the stuff that Jeff didn't want to. But the Raiders are 23rd in rush DVOA. They're tied for 7th in yards per carry allowed. I mean, the big thing here for Arizona is just that the Cardinals are 5.5-point favorites against Oakland. Oakland is basically the walking dead right now. They really just don't show any interest in winning. Their offense is really banged up. So it's pretty easy to see Arizona playing this game with a lead. And Byron Leftwich clearly knows how to make David Johnson the focal point of the offense. Gave him 21 carries last week in a game that they were trailing the entire time. You could make a pretty reasonable argument that he could push for 30 carries in this spot if they're leading. So I think he goes over.
Bukes, I give you a chance to rebuttal. What do you think?
Well, real quick, in terms of last segment, I mean, we should just rename this segment 3 Dummies and Steve Buchanan when it comes to Blake Bortles this week, okay? So there's that. There's my rebuttal. Anyways, for this total, if Jeff didn't tout him out so much last week, this would be the week that I would say, yeah, I should definitely be on David Johnson. It would work out. mean, look, I've said it like 6 times on this show this week. They've scored 10 points or less in 44% of their games this season. It's absolutely pathetic. Honestly, at this point, when they have a 14-0 lead against the Raiders, it feels like 40-0 to the Raiders because they just absolutely can't score. Anthony said that he could push 30 carries. Like, he's not joking. Like, that is actually a realistic thing that could happen this week. I mean, they're just so bad. So bad. They're going to make the Cardinals look like a juggernaut this week. So, yes, I like that prop. It's too low.
Bukes already has one segment. He wants to rename another one. So, Ryan, let's get your response here. What do you think?
Yeah, the Raiders are like waving the white flag like Steve should have been last week when he was not really on David Johnson. So Raiders absolutely nailed it in. The guys have kind of referenced all the talking points at this point. 6 of the last 7 times they have scored 10 or fewer points. This is going to be an unexpected positive game script for David Johnson. Set it up as a home favorite. Pretty comfortable projecting him for 20 to 25 touches here. We know, we're all on David Johnson now because Byron Leftwich is getting him the ball in the passing game, but still seems like a really good spot for at least 20 to 22 on the ground. You're getting this number at about plus 130 at the books. So line is set pretty good, but I'm going to hit the over on it.
All right, to wide receivers we go. Michael Thomas and 105.5 receiving yards. Too high, too low, or just right, Anthony?
I mean, I think this is a pretty interesting prop, actually, because Thomas has only gone over the century mark 3 times all year. But the Eagles are just so bad against opposing receivers, particularly number 1 wide receivers. They're allowing the most yards per game to them on the season. Really no doubt, obviously, that Thomas is the number 1 receiver for New Orleans. He has that 90% catch rate coming into this game, which is just insane. So you know that the chances that he gets, he's going to be able to capitalize on. Given the game total of 56, the fact that New Orleans is at home, I'm going to say this number is just right. I don't think that you should bet on over or under on it.
Ooh, we got it just right finally. Push. Ryan, where are you going on this?
Yeah, I think it's a good number. I mean, I don't want to, break Anthony's heart here, but it's 105.5, so it can't be perfect. We don't give it, we're not giving him half yards yet. So.
Close enough, Ryan.
It is close enough. So I do think it's spot on. He mentioned, he's only gone over this once in the last 5 games. Of course, that was a 211-yard performance against the Rams. He just has such a massive target and air yard share in the league's best offense. Philly is running out guys who are basically playing rec league flag football the last couple of weeks. It's just an absolute smash spot for Thomas. So I like him over 105.5.
Jeff, 105.5. Too high, too low, just right?
I mean, I'll take the under here. Look, Michael Thomas is obviously super efficient, great for fantasy, PPR, et cetera, et cetera. The Eagles haven't allowed a 100-yard receiver in 4 or 5 weeks here. They have tightened things up a little bit. And I know there's not a ton of talent back there, but they still have a pretty good defensive front. I feel like they're going to do a good enough job with Michael Thomas this week that it'll at least force the Saints to beat them in another way. Could be very wrong about this because, I mean, matchup-wise, Michael Thomas can easily take advantage of some of these players. But, again, I have some faith that the Eagles are going to keep this game slightly close. I would take the under here. This is a big number for Michael Thomas. I mean, he's not necessarily like a Tyreek Hill where he's going to go out and get a 60 yards on one play. So he's got to get in the rhythm. He's got to get all the targets, and it just builds up over time. The game script could go against him here, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And the Eagles are playing a little better, so I'll go under.
Hey, Steve, was that you who said yeah?
Of course it was.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Jeff gets David Johnson right now. He gets all cocky and you want to say under for this prop here. Look at the 3 games that Michael Thomas went over 100 yards. It was against the Buccaneers, the Falcons, and the Rams. If you take out your magnifying glass, you'll notice something all the same. Very poor secondaries. Guess what the Eagles have? Just that. They had rookie undrafted corners in the last game out there. And then Jalen Mills, when he comes back, big whoop. He can't defend my grandmother. So, look, Michael Thomas, very obtainable in this spot to go over 105. So I'll take the over on that one.
I like that. Magnifying glass and big whoop. Those are blasts from the past comments there. I like it. So finally at tight end, we've got a couple minutes left. Austin Hooper at 41.5 receiving yards. Where are you going with this one, Steve?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm torn on this one. It's close, but the problem is that Hooper doesn't get utilized in the red zone enough. So I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring in this one.
Yardage prop, Steve.
Huh?
Yardage prop.
So I'm going to go under on this one.
Anthony, what do you think, real quick?
I mean, I think that he's going to go over this number. Hooper's seen great volume recently. His lowest total in yards the last 5 games is 41. And Dallas doesn't have Sean Lee. I mean, they're terrible against tight ends without him. They just gave up 145 yards to Zach Ertz. So I'll go over.
Jeff, sweater brother, what do you think?
I like over in the spot a lot for Hooper. I think he's a really good secondary option. Byron Jones takes out Julio Jones. It really makes sense for Atlanta to target him a lot here. So I like the over for Hooper.
Last but not least, Ryan, what do you think?
Byron Jones plays sides. They're going to be smart enough to keep Julio away from him. And we've typically seen Hooper go over this number in games where they're playing from behind in high volume spots. So I think it's set pretty well, but I'm going to lean under.
But will Dallas be dumb enough to not put Byron Jones on Julio Jones?
Calm down.
Calm down, said Steve.
Calm down.
That's the question. Thanks for hanging out with us, Friday crew. Reid, you've been an amazing co-host. Just wow, the sweat will be back on Sunday at 11:30 a.m., taking you up until kickoff at 1 when lineups lock. So be sure to tune in on Sunday at 11:30 a.m. As for now, we're so out of here. TGIF. Boom.